I am going to answer your question very directly, but first I have to say something that I think is very important about the way that Israeli elections get discussed altogether. And it's sort of like the elephant in the room that never gets mentioned, and everybody proceeds under the understanding that these are legitimate elections. But I want to point to the fact that literally hundreds of thousands of Israeli Jewish settlers living in the occupied territories get to vote in these elections, while millions of Palestinians living in the same areas under occupation are not allowed to participate in those elections, even though the Israeli government controls pretty much everything in the occupied territories. And that system of discrimination in this voting is why we produce outcomes like the ones that we actually currently have. And if Israel were a legitimate democracy as opposed to an apartheid state, one of two things would happen. Either there would be no occupation, or you would not end up in a situation where people like Netanyahu can become prime minister. Now, as far as the Arab list is concerned, I think it is...
One moment, Mitchell, I'll get to you.
As far as the joint list is concerned, there is absolutely significant support. I think they responded specifically to the fact that there's a lot of anti-Arab incitement coming from Benjamin Netanyahu. I mean, there is this pretense that the Palestinian citizens of Israel are somehow stupid, that they can see that Netanyahu is inciting against them, but also running campaign ads in Arabic, and that they somehow might get confused. But there's no confusion at all about the fact that Netanyahu is running a racist campaign that targets Palestinian citizens of Israel and portrays them as other. And Simcha over here is pretty much exhibit A on sort of the attitude that is presented towards Palestinian citizens of Israel.
No, I mean, it is true that Netanyahu has used racist comments towards the Arab Israeli community and population. That has been deemed unacceptable by many people. That certainly shouldn't be part of the election campaign, and he's used it, and other parties have used it. But, I will say that last night he did call, which I believe was for the first time, that he wants to be everyone's prime minister. And now is the time to heal rifts. So that's, I think, an interesting part of Netanyahu's thing. I think Omar's comment about millions of Palestinians living in the West Bank not voting is one of the dumbest things I've heard in the last, week, and I've heard a lot of dumb things. I mean, there's an Oslo Accords since the early 1990s. 95% of the Palestinian population on the West Bank live under the Palestinian Authority, a government which actually supports terror and has nothing to do with the Israeli election. I mean, it has no place even in this discussion. So I know it's great that you can put in your points for calling Israel an apartheid state and they don't have the rights. It's just a silly comment. It has nothing to do with this.
Unfortunately,
because
Mitchell,
they
you're really
vote in the
insulting the
Palestinian
intelligence.
election. And in fact, Abbas is in his 14th year. Abbas is in his 14th year of his 4-year elected term. So why don't you call them, and why don't you have them run an election? And we can send some observers there. But the only place in the world where, in the Middle East, where the Arabs can vote, Muslims can vote in a free democratic election, is the 550,000 Israeli Arabs that turned out to vote yesterday.
That absolutely makes no sense. First of all, there is democracy in Tunisia, there is democracy in Lebanon, so that is just absolutely categorically incorrect. And frankly, you are being incredibly insulting to the viewers by pretending that the Oslo process is somehow still alive and that the Palestinians are governing themselves. We are watching every day Israel build more and more illegal settlements.
One moment, Mitchell. I'll get to you, Mitchell.
Do you want to talk about the Omar? Do you want to talk about the election in Israel, or do you want to score your points?
I will get
I mean, really, this is ridiculous.
Yeah. What is insulting about your comments is that you're operating under the pretense that Palestinians can control their lives at a time when Netanyahu is endorsing a plan by Trump that pretty much puts the Palestinians under the complete and total control of the Israeli military, from the north, south, east, and west. If you want to pretend that what the Palestinians are being offered is a state and that what they are being offered is self-governance, you're free to pretend that. But any thinking person watching the situation understands fully that the Palestinians are living under the complete and total control of Israel.
There was a leaked tape that came out just before the election by one of Netanyahu's most senior advisors. His name is Natan Eshel. And he was actually caught on tape saying that it is hate that unites the right-wing camp, saying that they don't vote for politicians who act in the national interest. In fact, they vote for politicians who will rob and be a man. And so basically, this is what the Likud party thinks of its own voters, of its own base.
You introduced the person who spoke before me as a pro-Israel. She just said that basically 90% of the Jewish population of Israel political views are unacceptable to her. In what sense is she pro-Israel? Unless pro means something else across the sea. Because from the way I look at it from here, she's anti-Israel. If you want to bring someone who is pro-Israel, I think maybe next time choose someone else. But let's talk about the Trump deal. I think it's very credible.
Yeah.
Some of it is very dangerous for the Jewish people because it gives Palestinian state, which is a problem. But some of it is very good because we can apply sovereignty on areas that until now we couldn't.
Which is, of course, an extremely offensive allegation for you to make, Simcha, but I'm more than happy to respond to it. First of all, your statistic that 90% that 90% of Israelis support annexation, I am not sure where you are getting that. It is certainly not a statistic that I've ever seen. A plurality of Israelis continue to support a two-state solution, even as that number drops, as it looks less and less likely that could actually be executed. But I have no idea where you're coming up with this percentage. But you know what, Simcha? You know what? Even if a majority...
Count the numbers.
Please
it's
stop.
It's not so hard.
You are extremely rude. Even if a majority, a strong majority, let's say, of Israelis supported annexation, let's say, here, I'm an American, right? Let's say a strong majority of Americans support a position that I disagree with. Does that mean that if I disagree with them, that I'm anti-American?
Let me add to that. In fact, we've had a time in the United States where the majority of white people in this country supported segregation, and opposing segregation did not make somebody anti-American. That is a critical point. And the other thing that I think is really important to note is that what the Palestinians are being offered under Trump's plan is not a state. And hearing Simcha talk about it as if it's a state is really laughable. What they're being offered is an open-air prison in which they are completely under the control of Israel. And anybody whose IQ is above average room temperature can understand that this is apartheid, and apparently that's a group of people that Mitchell is not one of them.